Let me preface what I'm about to tell you with a little background information. I'm retired from health and rescue after over 5 decades. I am now legally blind, but at the time of the following events, I still had my vision somewhat intact. Because of health issues, I ended up having to recreate the golden years of my life. I chose to raise trees and parrots. My son lived 1,500 miles away, so I lived alone as a geriatric wheelchair-bound old biddy who chose to live by the beat of my drum, cheerleader, Blackfoot, or Jew. What I am about to disclose to you is retold using security footage, legal documents, or reconstructed by way of memories, so parts might be a bit cattywonk to what actually occurred, but I assure you, I will attempt to be as close to accurate as possible. I am on my cell phone. There was a catalyst event that started the following events. I will not disclose what occurred. It is safe to say that police were called and warnings were issued to the neighbors in the strongest wording the police could legally give. That initiating event only seemed to light fires under them. Little did the police or I know that these two wolves were created with DNA that consisted of dynamite, TNT, and nuclear warheads. I was about to learn a lesson of a lifetime, a lesson that was both unwanted and undeserved, but nevertheless, a life lesson straight out of the outer limits or twilight zone. Decades ago, I purchased acres of land from a family member. Most lands are grandfathered in under tribal laws, so I started planning on land that just sat untouched. The acres up north were completed, and homes were fully operational off-grid, so I focused on the acreage here, southern land, where the events in this story occurred. The shape of the 40.2 acreage looked like a cooking pot with an S-shaped handle from high above. I had my home built in the eastern or southern corner of the pot. I started planting southern zone trees 18 years ago, many different fruit and nut trees. One special tree, an olive tree from God's holy lands of Jerusalem. One day my tree man contacted me, asking if I was interested in purchasing cherry trees from Japan. He warned there were bluebirds chirping about a possible import ban in the near future, so I jumped at that last chance and obtained 2 of them, a male and a female. I thought to myself, where in the holy hell am I going to plant these trees? My acreage was full. So I planted them near my southern home, like one would do for shade on hot summer days. Little did I know that would be the wisest choice I could have made on many levels. The first season they bloomed, their fragrance could be enjoyed a mile away on a calm windy day. Their blooms proved to be one of the most beautiful things one could see, making them the showcase of my home. They are the first things your eyes scan to, and you become mesmerized by their enchanting beauty and fragrance. One of the many gifts from God. Throughout the following years, I noticed the female tree would throw babies every 3rd season, sometimes every 2nd. The roots of these saplings could, as they grow, strangle any trees near them. So they had to be uprooted and replanted on free ground. I planted them along the sides of my winding driveway, about a mile long, with the S-shaped handle, and along the sides of my home, like a gift-wrapped home of cherry blossoms. The land to my left was rocky, soiled land. The land adjacent to my S-shaped drive on the east side is still owned by the city and is marked as marshland. The west side of my property is developed with homes now but was undeveloped land at the time of this story, not earth that one could easily plant on, but some developers bought it and sectioned it into about 3/4 acre plots and built one home on the most southern plot. Years after this crazy mess ended, that developer built homes on the rest of those plots. When the new homeowners moved in, my years-long nightmare began. I put up chain-linked electric fencing, and unknown to neighbors, full audio-video day/night security cameras, because I had fruits, nuts, and vegetables from my garden come up missing the following season they moved in. All hell broke out the following spring. A year later, I had baby cherry saplings pop up. 9 of them, to be exact, for that season. I let them grow to a safe replanting age and rolled out in my wheelchair with buckets of water and a shovel in hand to get to work. As I was on the ground, busy digging up babies, the neighbor, I'll call Karen from here on in, came out of her house, demanding to know what I was doing. I informed her I was digging up the saplings to give to the neighbor who lived north of my acreage. She went from 1 to 100 in a tenth of a second, screaming at me about how I couldn't do what I'm doing, that the trees belonged to her and I had to give them to her. I informed her that would not be happening. This angered her even more, and she advanced towards me, spewing verbal vomit and anger. When she put a foot and hands on my fencing, 6 feet of electrified climbing challenge, in what to me was an attempt to climb over, she got the shock of her life. After she regained her breath, her verbal vomit became pathetically comical. I just kept repeating, my land, my fencing, my property, my trees. I will do as I please, Karen. Her response to being called Karen was, who is Karen? I'm not Karen, stop calling me Karen. I quickly grew tired of this tornado of spinning verbal vomit. I put my shovel into the earth upright, using it to upright my body, and climbed back into my chair. I grabbed the bucket that had a few saplings and yelled, bye-bye Karen. As I was waiting for my wheels to engage, I watched Karen go back into her house, and I went into mine. About 30 minutes later, I had my parrot screaming. Someone was ringing my bell and knocking. My camera showed 3 police officers. When I answered and asked what I could do for them, they informed me they received complaints that I stole trees and assaulted someone a little while ago, and if I knew anything about it, I said follow me and rolled them to the saplings I still needed to uproot. They asked me if I was planting them. I said, no, I'm digging them up so they don't murder each other. They asked, where are the trees you're accused of stealing? I rolled them to my work shed, where I placed the bucket, and explained how I had to uproot the babies because their roots strangled each other. They then asked me to take them to where the supposed assault happened. I rolled them back to the saplings in the ground, pointed to the fence line, and said there. They asked where, and clearly, they were confused. At this time, Karen ran out and started her verbal vomit again. Both cops tried to get her to calm down and return to her home, but to no avail. They called for backup. After what seemed like an eternity of ear-shattering, nauseating verbal vomit from her, she was manhandled into submission by 4 of our finest in blue and pulled back into her home. The 2 cops with me asked if I could try to be a little more clear as to what had occurred because she was clearly incensed in anger. I asked the cops to not believe a word I say. Both cops' eyes bugged out of their sockets and their mouths dropped to the ground, because in any argument, there are always 3 sides, her side, my side, and the truth. They both quickly said, okay, what exactly is the truth? Almost in unison. Without saying a word, I pulled my cell from my wheelchair pocket, pulled up my security archives app, narrowed in on the time in question, put the cell on speaker with volume turned up to max, pushed play, and handed the cell to them. When they got to the point where I started addressing Karen as Karen, they both started gut laughing, and one asked if I was a Reddit reader. I said, sometimes, mostly YouTube. I then pulled up county land titles and deeds and showed them my property lines, showing how my fence line was 15 feet inside my property lines, for easements in cases of emergencies to allow emergency vehicles. Fire is a real threat to lives and livelihoods. I then pulled up the receipts, import/export clearance documents, and a clear description of the Japanese cherry trees, making sure they noticed my name, my address, my signature on the receipt, and my dates and times. One cop walked back to their car, and the other explained my rights to have her trespassed, to which I said yes. He then said he would file a trespass complaint against her and explained to her that she could be criminally charged should she continue her abusive activities. He then walked to his car, and I wheeled to the front of my home and watched them talk with each other on my cell using my live audio/video surveillance app. After a short while, one of the cops that was in Karen's house came out and walked up to them, and they continued talking while one of them was writing on a clipboard. 2 of them then walked back into Karen's house. Very quickly after, I could hear Karen's verbal vomit permeate the air with a vile, nauseating green haze of disgusting epitaphs. Then, as quickly as the verbal assaults began, a calming, peaceful quiet crystallized in the air, as if to try cleansing it with a touch of serenity. I guess I had forgotten to breathe because I was shaken out of my fog by one of the cops who was tapping my shoulder, asking me to breathe and if he should call for paramedics. I smiled. I shook my head no. He then told me if I had any more issues with her, to call him. He placed his card in my hand, explaining his phone number and case number, and then asked me to forward him a copy of my security footage relating to that complaint. He then told me he loved the part where I called her Karen. I shook my head affirmatively, shook his hand, thanked him and we parted ways. By then, I was exhausted, so I went inside to eat an early supper and planned to retire early and finish the sapling work in the morning. I called my back 40 neighbor and told her I'd roll by her way tomorrow. She said she would just meet me at the fence and use her hook line to pull the bucket over the fence. Cool beans. That plan suited me just fine. It saved me from having to roll a 15-mile round trip. As I was eating my supper, about 2 hours after the afternoon's crazy circus show, someone started pounding my front door as if trying to wake all the dearly departed within a 50-mile radius. Security cameras showed Karen and her husband, known as Kevin from here on in, at my door screaming, "I know you're in there. Come out here now." More pounding while I was on the phone with a cop from earlier, herein known as Zeus, the all-powerful. He could barely make out what I was saying over the pounding at the door, and the parrot screamed in fear. Minutes later, I could hear sirens on my security feeds. Moments later, 6 officers surrounded my front door, and after a few minutes, they were able to de-escalate the anger that permeated the air into thick pea soup. An officer, known as Prince Valiant from here on, called me on my cell, asking if I wanted to trespass on Kevin, to which I gave him a resounding yes. I watched on the surveillance feed as the cops took them down my drive. My gate was closed and locked, so the poor cops had to climb over the gate. I later rectified that by having an electric current fed through the south fence and gate and having an emergency gate opener installed so I could open it from my house or code box at the gate. The cameras at the south gate were very blurry. It seems Kevin or Karen sprayed something on them, but the audio was still crystal clear. The cops gave Karen a trespass charge and trespassed Kevin. Karen earned her first trip to have a cozy meet and greet with the judge, and I planned to be a visitor for that. After everyone was gone, I asked my back 40 neighbor's husband if he could mosey on over after dinner to clean my cameras before sunset in exchange for a basket of fruits, their choice. It's good to have great neighbors who are kind and give of their time and elbow grease. The next morning, I resumed my sapling uprooting. Karen came out to offer reruns of her verbal vomiting, her Karenisms, and her mental gymnastics of pure rage and craziness. It was then that I confirmed in my mind that this Karen was a special kind of Karen, a narcissistic sociopath who lived in some altered reality that consisted of unicorns, rainbows, and minions of monkeys who were at her every beck and call. I finished the last sapling and pulled myself to my chair to put all the saplings into one bucket. While I was calling back my neighbor to meet me at the north corner, I rolled past Karen. She started screaming at me, demanding I hand over her trees. I told her, "Karen, we went over this yesterday. What is your mental malfunction, Karen? They're not your trees, Karen, I promised them to my friend. Not you." I made my way to the back 40 neighbor, who asked me what was going on. While I was explaining to her the preceding day's circus show of crazy, our finest in blue rode up to us on the eastern easement. It seemed Karen called and made a second complaint against me for stealing trees. Only at that time had I supposedly taken money from her in exchange for the saplings. This cop knew nothing of the prior day's events. So, the three of us viewed the security feeds of 50 Shades of Crazy. It's a great movie, people, hilarious with healthy helpings of aggravation and exasperation. My poor neighbor just kept shaking her head and told the cop that Karen needed a pretty new white jacket with extra long sleeves and pretty ties that could put gorgeous bows on her back. The cop snickered. I added that Karen should either also get a long time out in a pink room or a cool bouncy room, extra padded because Karen was that extra special kind of Karen. The poor cop lost it with that. I have a special kind of cruel, and my back 40 neighbor gets me and my very dry sense of humor. After the poor cop regained his composure, he told us he was all over this. This cop will here be known as Copper Bean, in reference to the British funnyman Mr. Bean. Mrs. Back 40 and I chatted for a while longer. We arranged a time for her to come over to pick fruits and stop by for tea, and then we parted ways as I had workmen due to arrive to restyle my south fence and gate. God bless the men who can weld steel into beautiful masterpieces of gatework. After the electrician, fence man and his co-workers finished up, I invited them up to my house for a quick barbecue of burgers and a salad, from my garden. Our late lunch was disturbed by a barrage of screeching that broke our sounds of silence, shattered the stratosphere, and gave the angels above some heavenly hearty laughter. Apparently, Karen had gotten her hands on a megaphone. I called 911 non-emergency. The funny thing is, at that time I didn't have to say a single word, but I could hear the 911 operator tell me she was sending the squad back out there. Poor Copper Bean would be given a repeat performance of the movie 50 Shades of F Crazy. Poor Copper. Karen earned another meet and greet with the judge and a couple more charges of breach of peace and harassment of a disabled elderly person. We offered poor Copper Bean a burger and tea. He took us up on our offer and called in for a 20-minute break. We had a too short, lovely respite that ended all too suddenly as poor Copper was called back into service. He thanked us, chugged his tea, grabbed his burger, and ran. I told the workers, "Welcome to my life, a never-ending soap opera entitled As the Crazy Circus Turns." They heartily laughed. Good men. They get me. They thanked me, packed up, and did one last test at the gate before they left. All was quiet on the eastern wall, fence, but we all know that hair-raising, fear-evoking old adage it's always calmest before the storm, don't we? Well, on a Saturday morning, I was out pulling veggies from my garden. I heard a faint hissing sound I couldn't make out. The next thing I knew, I was being punched and beaten. There was no way I could fend off the blows from fists coming at me from multiple directions. The blows seemed to never end. When I awoke, it was evening. My chair was on top of me, and I was lying in curdled puddles of blood. I tried finding my cell. It was at my side, with the screen shattered. I dialed 911, but I couldn't talk. It was garbled. Zeus and his partner showed up along the eastern wall. I heard them calling my name. I started screaming. It was all I could do. I guess they called it fire because, after a short while, I could hear more sirens. I texted Zeus the code to open the south gate. They found me, my saviors, my angels, in human bodies. I will spare you readers all the gore and simply say I ended up with my jaw broken in 3 places, 7 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a concussion, a lacerated liver, as well as other soft tissue and organ injuries, major black eyes, and a broken arm. I'd read for weeks. My body looked like a patchwork painting in hues of white, black, blue, purple, and crusted browns. I looked at the pretty picture. Zeus and Prince Valiant visited me after I arrived back home from the hospital. We talked, a difficult venture for me as my jaw was still wired shut, about what happened. I had signed my statement while in the hospital, and they took copies of the security footage. It turned out Kevin sprayed paint on what he thought were all the cameras facing me at the time of the attack. He didn't know about the cameras in the fruit trees and along the western wall. Kevin never laid a fist on me, but 3 men pummeled me while Kevin watched and laughed, calling out blows as if he were a spectator at a WWE fight match. Kevin is married to the right woman. They are both that special kind of crazy. Kevin earned a pair of shiny new bracelets. We all know how movie stars just love their bling. As well as free 4-star accommodations after his photo shoot for his starring role in the movie 50 Shades of Crazy. as well as his recurring role in the soap opera as the crazy circus turns. Kevin got out of jail on bail while awaiting trial. Investigators were busy finding the three beasts from Hades. I told the investigators to search Kevin and Karen's friends, associates, and family members because I had never seen them before. Well. Investigators do what investigators do, oh, so well. Weeks later, they found them. It turns out they were Kevin's three younger brothers. All I can say is Kevin's family tree grows nothing but rotten worm-ridden sour bitter apples. Arrest warrants were issued and forwarded to 5 states. They were picked up in their home state and issued their own sets of bling and given photo shoots and 4-star accommodations of their own with promises of free vacations when travel plans were made, extraditions to my state. Well, I assumed Kevin didn't like that we, the police and I, gave his brothers their starring roles in this crazy soap opera and movie. The night Kevin's brothers were given their bling, my security cameras caught Kevin and Karen going shopping on my land. I called the brave boys in blue. They came up dark, no lights or sirens. Putting in that code box at the south gate turned out to be a blessing. And the drama play Kevin and Karen put on in my backyard was priceless. I popped my corns, sat back, and was entertained. Nay, I was mesmerized by the pure audacity and entitlement of the Ks. Their impromptu acting was chock full of gut-splitting jocularity at its finest. I remember thinking I needed to plan for an Emmy Award show because they both certainly earned one that night. A mix of Laurel, Hardy, and Monty Python. The play was truly a sight to see. 4 cops were chasing 2 rather rotund people around as they were throwing their ill-gotten gains at the poor officers. Truly a food fight of gargantuan proportions. As all plays do, this one came to a European end. After the bling was passed out and the curtain fell, the 2 Ks were taken for photo shoots and given spot treatments, to wash off all the food stuck on them. They were given their 4-star accommodations and invitations to visit the judge. 8 days after the special K Food Fight Festival, I was suddenly jarred awake to the thunderous sounds of engines roaring, earth shaking and pounding, and the fingernail on chalkboard screeching of metal on metal, loud enough to wake the slumbering angels in the heavens above. I called the police, and by that time I had 911 on speed dial. I later found out the back 40s had also called in the boys in blue. Karen's 2 brothers were caught red-handed in their trucks with oversized tires, to make up for what they seemed to lack between their legs, and chains attached to their tow hitches. The other ends of those chains were attached to what was left of my mangled fencing. Several poles were pulled out of the ground, and the chain link more resembled silver ramen noodles that were poured into a pile on the ground. Sparks were flying everywhere. It looked like the 4th of July. These 2 brothers turned out to be a special kind of stupid, attaching metal chains to a metal truck, then attaching the chains to an electric source? Really? I shut off the power grid to the fencing, and the ramen noodle chefs were given their own bling and 4-star accommodations. Okay folks, if you've been keeping up on your head count, we are up to 7. I thought to myself ... just how bad can this soap opera movie get tilde? Little did I know, how little did I know. How naive I was. I still had a lot of learning to do to find out just how deep this crazy rabbit hole went. While I was busy having my security fencing rebuilt and fortified, I was waiting with eager anticipation for my day to shine in court. I was jolted out of my euphoric haze by a constant buzzing and knocking at my door. My security fencing was still under repair. Security cameras showed a couple of sheriff's deputies awaiting my response. When I opened the door, they informed me they had an arrest warrant for me and I would be going with them. They told me to stand up and not fight them. When I tried to explain to them that I had been wheelchair bound for about a decade by then, they told me they were informed I was faking for sympathy, and they pulled me out of my chair. When I crumbled to the floor, the look of shock and embarrassment on their faces was almost worth what I was going through. They spent the next 3 hours trying to figure out how they were going to transport me in my 1,000-pound wheelchair. They ended up transporting me using a folding wheelchair that they cuffed my hands to. After my photo shoot, great pictures, I asked for a dozen super glossies of my best side pose. I was processed and told I was being arrested for grand theft, filing false police reports, and multiple charges of harassment and intimidation. I made one phone call to my lawyer. This was a whole new level of crazy. I will spare you people the long, boring legal quagmire my lawyer pulled me out of and just give you the juicy aftermath. According to what the investigators and my lawyer were able to piece together, Karen's sister, who happened to work for the county court's office, pushed through falsified fraudulent police reports to have the county's prosecutor file formal charges against me. The grand theft was built on the lie that I had stolen all the Japanese cherry trees on my land. By then, I had 72 of them. They claimed each tree was worth $550 per tree. I was accused of stealing $30,600 from trees. I was accused of harassing their family members by making false accusations and false police reports. The family of crazy, both Karen and Kevin's families, were all listed on the complaint against me. Mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters. They filed an 11-meter suit against me. They each were asking for $1 million in damages. Fucking crazy outrageous. As the truth came out, Karen's sister used a gullible judge to sign the arrest warrant. The fallout. It took a little over 2 years to get my legal woes fixed and my record expunged. See the preface for my reasons why this was especially important to me. Over another year and a half, Karen, her sister, and Kevin agreed to plead guilty to lesser charges and served 6 months, because of 4 children under the age of 7, 11 years, and 6 years, respectively. Karen's sister was fired by the very same judge she snowballed. Karen's 2 brothers served 5 years each and were ordered to pay me $50,000 each in restitution. Kevin and Karen were ordered to pay me $25,000 each in restitution, for the loss of foods they used in that colossal food fight. Kevin's 3 brothers each received 25 to life on felony assault of an elderly disabled person with grievous bodily harm and were ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution each. My lawyer had his payday when he countersued both families. We settled for $3 million. My lawyer took 1/3. I ended up with 5 of the 6 homes that used to belong to the 3 main family units, as well as cash, stocks, bonds, and jewelry. All parties involved in this nightmare were each given permanent stay-away orders to not come within 1,000 yards of my person or property. Everyone received 8 10-year probation with notices that their original charges, except Kevin's 3 brothers, who were prosecuted on all original charges, would be refiled and prosecuted. Double jeopardy doesn't apply because they pleaded guilty on different lesser charges, should they fail to meet every stipulation of original sentencing. Mr. and Mrs. Back 40 came for a visit after things calmed down. We reminisced about the past 5 years of crazy shit shows. Mr. Back 40 gave me 2 grams, which he said were for the trees and all the fruit and veggies I had given them over the decades. Mrs. Back 40 said to spend it on an indulgence I wouldn't normally spend on. These 2 are great people. I will miss living near them. I promised I would try to keep our community peaceful from then on, but I seem to be a magnet for crazy. We laughed, shared a great steak and lobster barbecue, and sipped mint juleps as the sun went down. Truly great people. Then Hurricane Irma hit. As of this writing, I have officially sold off everything and am relocating to somewhere with, hopefully, less crazy residents. My lesson to share with you readers? Throughout all of this nightmare, I was always confused as to how people could become so crazy. Then, one day, I had a lightbulb moment. I finally understood where my confusion was coming from. Confusion, the anger created when one's mind overrides the body's basic desires to pummel the living shit out of some asshole who desperately deserves it. Stay frosty, my friends. There really are crazy people out there. Edit to answer all the PMS. Obviously, my recounting of these events that occurred is inaccurate. There were a myriad of things that were said and a myriad of events that occurred. For my own reasons, I chose to include the events shared above. Life in a small city will be different from what happens in larger, more populous cities. So it is never wise to compare how each local government reacts or responds to any situation. The same can be said for judges and law enforcement agencies. I did not post this for votes. I was asked by a YouTube user to write a comment I had made on his channel into a story to share what happened to me. I wrote the parts I am willing to publicly share in hopes that it might help someone who finds themselves in a similar situation cope, deal with, and navigate through their own situation. Period. I pray you find peace.